Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Bisacky, and today I will be discussing flexible electrode incorporated textiles for health monitoring. Today I will discuss the background, problem statement, and identify research gaps. I will identify smart material capabilities and advantages over existing capabilities. I will identify types of smart materials used, principles of operation, and performance characteristics. I will also identify current and future applications. Health and vital sign monitoring is typically isolated to a hospital bed for seriously ill or injured patients. However, recent improvements in wearable textiles for health monitoring is bringing this monitoring technology to everyday use. Even in today's health-conscious society, many warning signs for potential diseases or injuries go ignored or unnoticed. One example of this is the case of sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS, in which apparently healthy newborn dies of unknown causes. Another example of this phenomenon is foot ulceration in diabetics. Often diabetic patients do not notice injury to their feet due to diabetic neuropathy, and injuries are slow healing due to angiopathy or blood vessel damage. These seemingly innocuous injuries can lead to foot amputations and a shortened life expectancy. Our problem statement then becomes, a comprehensive, easy-to-use health monitoring system can characterize and prevent injury and illness. Sudden infant death syndrome and diabetic ulcers can be used to illustrate this statement. In the case of sudden infant death syndrome, monitoring of vital signs such as electrocardiograph, breathing rhythm, oxygen saturation in blood, temperature, and blood pressure can identify at-risk infants and further characterize the risk of SIDS, possibly preventing infant death. Notably, in the case of diabetic ulcers, injury often occurs after a period of time of no injury when a patient, through a false sense of security, is less vigilant about injury prevention. Computer-based monitoring can allow the patient and his or her physician to characterize damage to the foot before injury happens and take preventative measures to correct the problem, preventing further injury and amputation. In this case, ease of use and comfort are particularly important because health monitoring systems will be used in the long term. Smart materials used for health monitoring are varied and can include a multitude of different smart characteristics. These systems can be used to monitor body and skin temperatures, heart rate, respiration rate, electrocardiograms, electroencephalogram, electromyogram, galvanic skin response, and activity levels. Additionally, the miniaturization of computing technology due to Moore's law has had a synergistic effect on smart health monitoring system. Computing systems are often used for data collection and transmission, and their miniaturization both increases the capabilities of smart material-based systems, as well as making them less intrusive to the user, which can lead to increased use. Smart textile systems have had a variety of advantages over traditional monitoring systems. This first advantage is the improved wearability over traditional solutions. In the case of Zhang et al.'s ECG's monitoring textile, the smart textile electrode used by the authors reduces skin irritation caused by traditional adhesive and conductive gel electrodes and is capable of long-term monitoring and integration into wearable articles. Additionally, data collection and wireless transmission to healthcare providers can enable instant reaction to a dangerous event by the healthcare team. Once reviewed, data can be transmitted through hard wires or increasingly through a wireless network. Wireless networks like that investigated by Milinkovic et al. Can enable real-time data analysis and review by both the user and his or her healthcare provider. This wireless transmission allows for inexpensive, non-invasive, and continuous updates of medical records through the internet. This real-time data analysis is the most significant advantage of smart textiles over traditional sensors and is cited over and over again as the primary benefit of smart textiles. Smart materials used in health monitoring include thermocouples for body and skin temperature measurement, piezoelectric sensors for heart rate and respiration rate, flexible electrodes for ECGs, EEGs, and EMGs, as well as accelerometers to measure activity level and sense falls in real time. While the use of these smart materials for health monitoring is not new, the incorporation of smart materials displaying these properties into flexible textiles is new. The remainder of this presentation will discuss the integration of these smart material sensors into textiles through the use of flexible electrodes. Smart sensors can be embedded into the textiles in a variety of ways, but all integration methods hinge on using a flexible conductive material to transmit signals to and from the smart sensor. Two proven methods of applying the conductor are by printing conductive networks onto the surface of the textile and by weaving conductive materials directly into the textile. Printing is used extensively in non-woven textiles, however, their use in woven textiles is limited. Notably, these networks can both transmit data to and from sensors and act as sensors themselves for ECG, EEG, and EMG purposes. An example of a printed conductive network is Paul et al.'s screen-printed conductive network. The authors use a three-part system including a polyurethane paste base, a polymer paste with 60% silver flakes, approximately 10 microns in length, as a conductor, and a carbon black-filled rubber encapsulation material. Although this rubber material's primary purpose is to prevent damage to the silver electrodes, it is also conductive. The screen-printed conductive network is shown. Silver-coated fibers can also be used in woven materials. An example of this is the woven conductive fibers in Perrier et al.'s diabetic foot ulcer prevention sock, shown. Zhang et al. Also used silver-coated polyamide yarns as brushes woven into their textile. The principles of operation and their performance characteristics are slightly different for the different manifestations of conductive networks on textiles. In printed conductive networks, the electrical current is transmitted through the conductive layer on the surface of the textile, as shown. Paul et al. Show this method to be useful in ECG, electrooculography or EOG, and EMG measurements. The authors found this method also resulted in a 50 Hz noise and in baseline drift, so this method is only applicable in scenarios for which noise and baseline drift can be compensated. And in woven conductive fibers, the electrical current is transmitted through the material itself. Sriram et al. Found that while their flexible electrodes were functional, the experimental setup resulted in a significant amount of noise. Fortunately, an appropriate filter can be used to minimize the noise. A third manifestation of flexible electrodes incorporated into fabrics is the embroidery of silver-coated polyamide filaments onto the surface of the textile, as shown in the image to the right. These conductive fibers have direct contact with skin hair, which conducts electricity from the body to the textile. Zhang et al. Found this brush method to be more effective than woven textiles or commercial plate electrodes due to its parallel electric conduction circuit, the fiber inclining effect under motion, the larger effective contact area, and the comfortable adhesive-free contact. The authors also determined that their textile can be laundered up to 50 times at home, which is crucial for use in frequently worn textiles. These flexible electrode textiles are currently in their infancy, and researchers are still investigating their uses and applicability for mass use in production. In the future, these flexible electrode textiles can be used to monitor chronic illness and severe injury, including neurological diseases such as epilepsy, cardiovascular disease, respiratory diseases such as asthma and sleep apnea, and as mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, SIDS and the identification of diabetic ulcers. These textiles can also be used to monitor athletic performance in both amateur and professional athletes. Wearable electrode fabrics can also be used to track patient mental health, including the diagnosis and management of disorders such as bipolar disorder. In summation, smart materials are being used in a variety of different applications for health monitoring. In particular, flexible electrodes can be successfully incorporated into textiles for wearable electricity sensors and conductors. These conducting fibers can be painted or printed directly onto the fabric, as is the case in Paul et al. They can be woven into the fabric, as in Perrier et al., or they can be embroidered onto the surface, as in Zhang et al. These electrodes and conducting fibers can be used to capture biological signals or to transmit data from a sensor to an antenna or a data collection device. Here is a list of all of my references. In the remaining minute, I will discuss Paul, Tora, Beebe, and Tudor's paper in Sensors and Actuators A. This article documents an extension of their work in 2014. In this work, the authors screen-printed electrodes onto woven textiles to improve the breathability and comfort of the resulting electrode garment. The experimental design differed primarily from the original work in 2014 in the material used as a base polymer and the method in which it was applied. In this experiment, authors used a different polymer base deposited in 3 layers onto the substrate prior to the application of the conducting epoxy, as shown in the image to the left. The electrical components are then attached to the textile with a silver-impregnated conducting epoxy, as shown in the image in the middle. The circuit is then encapsulated with the polymer, and encapsulated again with carbon black-loaded rubber, as shown in the right 2 images. The authors found that their printed electrodes performed well as silver chloride electrodes, and better than passive electrodes when the subject was stationary or walking. However, running caused the electrodes to lose contact with the skin, making them less effective. This paper is important because it represents a step forward in the state of the art and acts as proof of concept for flexing polymer-based electrodes onto textiles. Thank you for your time. This concludes my presentation.